to my channel. This is Prepping by Faith, and today I'm going to be talking to you about 5 tips for shtf meal planning. So the first one that we are going to start off with is you need to be prepping food that your family enjoys eating. And I know this is one that we have gone over in the prepping community quite a bit, but it's really actually very important, because if you're putting up foods that people really are not going to be wanting to eat in an shtf situation, then you're going to have other issues on your hands, especially if you have young children. The other thing is if you aren't used to eating these foods regularly, you could end up with a lot of stomach issues, whether that resulted in the runs or constipation, and those are other things that we don't want to have to battle in an shtf situation. You also need to be mindful when putting up foods that your family eats regularly, that they are items that are not going to injure anyone. If somebody has, say, an issue with high blood pressure and they cannot tolerate large quantities of sodium, then you need to be mindful of that when you are putting away food for shelf-stable food. You need to be thinking about those sorts of things. You can get lower sodium soups. You can put up canned vegetables with no sodium or low sodium. These are all things that you need to be taking into consideration and into account when you are putting up foods for your family. One of the other things, like I said, with the stomach situations is you need to make sure that when you are putting up these foods, you are also putting up medications and things to alleviate stomach issues, stomach symptoms. So one of the things that I have done is I have calculated how much Benefiber that we would need to put up for a situation like that, and I get the generic stuff from Walmart, and some of this stuff can be quite pricey, so you need to be thinking about those sorts of things, whether it's Metamucil or whatever it is that you use that you know that you can tolerate. Don't put up things that your body can't tolerate or don't work for you either. Same thing with, if you ended up with a situation where you had the runs, does Imodium work for you, or do you need to find something else that is something that you use now? Be thinking about what you use now, what you consume now, and as far as foods, that your family likes or dislikes. I know for my family, they like rice. My husband likes it a lot more than we do, but we prefer pasta, and so I have made sure that I have accounted for that. And we're going to get into the actual amounts and quantities and how we arrive to those calculations in a future video. So this one, I'm just going to set you guys up with my 5 tips for shtf meal planning. So number 2, food that cooks quickly. I think that is something that we need to be taking into account when we are putting up food for shtf meal planning. I know a lot of us, especially in the homesteading community, are interested in doing everything from scratch and learning how to do all these things from scratch. And while those things have a place and a purpose, in an shtf situation, you're going to want to be conserving as many of your resources as possible. I don't care if it's wood or it's propane or it's natural gas or whatever it is that you're using for your cooking source. You're going to want to conserve that to the best of your ability and make it stretch. So you're not going to want to be cooking things that are going to take hours and are going to consume a lot of those resources. So be mindful of that. Think about things that you're going to be able to cook in, anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes would be the range that I would recommend you guys try to stay within as far as cooking foods and utilizing those resources. So, things like pasta that can cook up really quick, instant rice, even rice, regular rice, you can cook that usually within 20 minutes. At my altitude, it takes a little bit longer, so I have to account for that. We are sitting at about 30 minutes on our rice at this altitude. So, your instant potatoes, things like that. That's why it's important to have those canned foods and things in your preps. So be mindful of how many resources you have and how quickly you would go through those resources when you're cooking. So the third thing that you need to do is making sure that you're putting up foods that meet your caloric needs. And this is why, there's a lot of people that want to talk about putting up all of these healthy foods, and I think healthy foods have a place. Yes, you need to be putting aside your fruits and your vegetables and things of that nature. But we need calories in order to survive, especially if we're in an SHTF situation where we're going to be using a lot more of our physical labor. If we're going to be, outside gardening, or we're going to be standing watch, and we're going to be, walking a perimeter, if we're going to be carrying any sort of heavy gear, if anybody's going to be doing any sort of hunting, all of these things are going to require a lot more energy, chopping wood, whatever it is. So you're going to have to account for that. So whatever you consume now, if you are less physical and you're less physically active, then you're going to need to account for that and actually store up more calories and have more food on hand than you would otherwise. So that's where I think it's important that you start thinking about the difference in densely caloric foods, right? So like I was saying, pasta has a lot more calories than, say, rice. Even things like your potatoes are going to have higher, more dense calories, more packed for the punch. Yes, you need some of those vegetables and fruit in there for fiber and that sort of thing, but thinking about, your proteins, your fats, so your peanut butter, your cooking oils, all those sorts of things you need to account for when you are putting up for your preps. So the fourth thing that I wanted to talk about is putting up foods that have at least a 1+ year shelf life. So that's going to be everything, from your canned goods to your dry goods, to if you want to get into freeze-dried foods and you feel that that is something that could meet those needs for your family. Be mindful of what things are going to last. Really look at those dates when you're picking up those prepackaged items, because sometimes a lot of those prepackaged items are only good out about 6 months. So I would try to steer away from more of those and be thinking about the things that you can put into your pantry that are going to last for at least a year, so that you don't have to rotate out of those as quickly, and so that you make sure you have your pantry based around those items that are going to really last for your family. So be making sure that you think about those sorts of things. And the fifth thing is just being mindful of foods that can be easily stored and stacked. So, anything that's going to be in great big bulky containers is obviously going to take up a lot more room. That's one of the reasons why, if you guys go ahead and you start putting everything in these buckets, those can start taking up a lot more space. There are other options, other ways to store those. I know myself, putting it in Mylar and then putting it in Gamma Vaults, I feel like the Gamma Vaults can be stacked a little bit easier. There are plenty of different options. Just really start researching and looking into what is going to work for you. As far as canned goods go, stacking them in flats and then having them, layered with cardboard or another, piece of material in between, so that you can really stack those and get those packed in there for height. Just be mindful of weight limits also when you're storing these things, because you want to make sure whatever you're putting them in, whether it's a cabinet or a shelving unit or anything like that, you want to make sure that you're mindful of what weight limit, because these canned goods and things can get quite heavy after some time, and you don't want any of that stuff falling down, or you don't want a situation where you have too much weight concentrated in one area of your home, and then those floorboards begin to weaken in that area, and you have a situation that's even worse on your hands where that could possibly collapse. So be mindful of those sorts of things when you're putting up food for your preps. And if you guys have enjoyed this video today, please give me a like, share, and subscribe. And remember to pray, prep, and put God first. God bless.